So glad to have everybody here. We are talking about the science and scripture of effective major gifts fundraising with 2,000-year-old best practices led by special guest, the extremely well-known in somewhat narrow circles, as his daughters will remind him, uh, Dr. Russell James, an unknown to some, a legend to others, as those of us in the sector know. And we're so happy to have him here. So welcome, everybody. Welcome. Happy May Day, as it may happen in Europe. This event is approved for 1.0 CFRE credits. We've added a question to the survey at the end to certify your participation. So just let us know. At the end of the session, we'll drop a link in there, and once we can make that happen. Here's the agenda. We'll do some very quick intros, and then we'll hand the microphone to Dr. James, and then we'll also be able to do some wrap up and next steps as well. So quick intros. On my end, my name is Patrick. This is what I look like with a much more biblical beard. And along with my co-founder, Jennifer Shiao Spradling, I live in New York City. Jennifer lives out in the great city of Seattle. And we are lucky to be part of Free Will, which is the biggest estate planning and plan giving solution in the United States, trusted by 1,900 nonprofit partners, including 500 churches. So churches are by far the most represented type of organization at Free Will, and we're really happy to support so many of those. And we have over 5 centuries of combined fundraising experience, which will not get us all the way back to the 2,000-year origins of the work we're about to do. And we love to give some of our favorite books away to folks who join these sessions. And in particular, we are extra excited today to give to 10 folks a new book called The Biblical Fundraiser by the author who you might recognize as our guest today, Russell James III. Dr. James, I didn't realize that you were the third father and grandfather. Is that right?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. Helping Christians enjoy their wealth, and we'll dive in there. So without further ado, I will introduce Dr. Russell James, pictured only in, this is called a shirt vest, is that right? What kind of vest is this?
I'm trying to get that 19th century English professor vibe
Yeah,
going. Like doing the sweater vest, or goes by various other names.
looks very good, but most photos you will see Dr. James looking quite good in a vest and similar tie. So at Texas Tech and Lubbock University, professor of charitable financial planning, 25 years working and researching the nonprofit sector. This has one of, but I would say certainly the most important influential academic research on major and plan giving, and the most important researcher in modern fundraising. And so with that, I'm going to pull my share down and let Dr. James take control of it. Also was president of a Christian college at one point, and many other exciting lives. So I will go off video. Dr. James, thank you so much for having us here, and I can't wait for all of you to learn from Dr. James.
Well, thanks so much, Patrick. I really appreciate it. And I'm really looking forward to being able to share some ideas here for you on the science and scripture of effective major gifts fundraising. I like to present at various fundraising conferences, and folks always want to know what are the best practices. Well, I'm going to give you some best practices. They just happen to be about 2,000-year-old best practices, and they come from 1 Timothy 6. So I'm going to start with some good news. The good news is this: if you want to effectively raise major gifts, the good news is that everything you need to know about effective major gifts fundraising is contained in just one sentence. But along with my good news, you got to recognize I'm also a lawyer. That means my good news is going to come with a disclaimer. So it is true, everything you need to know about effective major gifts fundraising is contained in just one sentence, but this is the sentence. This is the earliest known record of what we call 1 Timothy 6:17 through 19. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to ask you to read Greek, much less all caps Greek with no spaces. Now, we're going to get to the passage, but first, I want to jump in with some data, asking this question: what's missing from fundraising at churches and Christian organizations? Now, to understand that, first you need to understand what charitable giving in the United States normally looks like. This is what charitable giving looks like for the typical nonprofit in the United States. This actually comes from a huge study that involves 12,394 charities. Very recent data shows us that normally the top 0.3% of donors provide just over half of the money, about 51, 52%. Now, understand this is what fundraising at charities normally looks like. This is what charities normally experience. Now, what if we just ripped out almost all of those big donations? Well, we would move from the left-hand chart to that right-hand chart. Now, why am I showing you that comparison? Because this is what charitable giving to churches in the United States looks like. I mentioned that top 0.3% of donors provide just over half of the money normally, but in churches, that group of donors provides only 14.4% of the money. Even the top 1% of church donors provide only 19.6% of gift income. Well, we can also see this in the estate data. So this is from tax data showing where people make gifts in their estate plans. And first, the good news on the left-hand side, as wealth increases, the likelihood that someone is going to include a gift to a religious charity goes up and up and up. But notice the right-hand side. As wealth increases, the share of charitable giving that goes to religious organizations, what does it do? It goes down and down and down. How do we reconcile these two things? Very straightforward. The likelihood of giving goes up, but those gifts stay small. And this does include religious organizations that are not churches. So we actually see it in both sides of the data. The data shows what's missing. Both churches and other religious organizations are good at getting small gifts. They're just bad at getting large ones. They're even good at getting small gifts from wealthy donors. They're bad at getting large gifts from wealthy donors. So what's missing? It's not that wealthy people aren't Christians. It's not that wealthy Christians don't make large gifts. They just don't make them to the church or religious organizations. Now, I want to point out that those large gifts are missing, but there's something else that I want to argue is also missing, and that's the missing ministry of major gifts fundraising. A scriptural ministry that is focused on the wealth holders, and it's a ministry that's often missing from the church. The missing ministry of major gifts fundraising is described in this passage, 1 Timothy 6:17 through 19. It's all one sentence in the original. Now, this is actually a bit different than other passages. There are many passages in the Bible written to the giver. This one is written to the one whose ministry is to encourage generosity in others. It's written to the fundraiser. Now, notice Paul is outlining for Timothy the scriptural ministry of major gifts fundraising. In fact, the Voice translation begins with, "Here's what you say." Now, I will call this particular ministry biblical fundraising just to be offensive. So let's take a deeper dive into this offensive ministry. Now, it's different in several ways. Biblical fundraising is a scriptural ministry focused on the wealth holders. Ordinary fundraising, just a way to get cash to the nonprofit. Now, why do I call this the offensive ministry? Well, let's have a typical ministry conversation. "Hi, I'm Bob. I'm the new youth minister." "You're the what?" "The youth minister. I'll be working with the young people in our church. I'll also be working on programs to reach out to other young believers in the community to minister to them as well." Now, let's make it offensive. "Hi, I'm Bob. I'm the new minister to the rich." "You're the what?" "The minister to the rich. I'll be working with the rich people in our church. I'll also be working on programs to reach out to other rich believers in the community to minister to them as well." Ooh, I don't know. That feels a little uncomfortable, right? First, let me say that both Paul and James match. Now, James warns against breaking the fellowship community based upon wealth in James 2. Now, he's talking about making distinctions. Literally, this word means to separate throughout or wholly. Now, Paul's special ministry to the wealthy focuses on bringing the rich into more deeply community, which is the koinonia, through their sharing. And indeed, the sharing, the word for sharing used here is koinonikos. So it is a deeper connecting of the rich, pulling them into community through their sharing. Now, I want to make one key distinction, at least the first of those of two key distinctions about this passage. And that is for you to understand that wealth sharing is not income sharing. Now, biblical fundraising here immediately talks about the donor's wealth. It's just one sentence, and in the Greek, it has 7 references to accumulated wealth. This is not income. This is not income sharing. This is not income conversations. Ordinary fundraising tends to fear these wealth conversations and stay stuck in the realm of disposable income decisions. It may be one of the reasons why Paul had to mention it 7 times in one sentence. So understand, wealth is not income. Income is not wealth. Of course, you can have high income and build no wealth. Famous celebrities and athletes often go bankrupt. But also, most people don't realize that oftentimes those with high wealth have little reportable income. They often will own assets that go up in value, but they don't sell. Wealth is held in assets, not in cash. Now, this is not just an economic or a fundraising issue, it's also a spiritual issue. You see, in the New Testament, there are 2 types of bad stewards. There's the binging bad steward, but there's also the burying bad steward. If you look at what is called financial stewardship teaching in most of the churches, it is almost 100% exclusively focused on helping people to not be the binging bad steward. And that's fine, but notice Jesus actually told more stories about the burying bad steward, whether it's the parable of the talents or the parable of the minas, the parable of the rich fool. This burying bad steward is dealing with a different spiritual issue. Let's get real practical. Suppose a person is being a burying bad steward. They've been richly blessed with wealth, and their plan is to just bury it and die with it. But then we talk to them and we convince them to share 10% of their income. That's great. Or maybe it's 30%, or even, dare I say it, 50% of their income. That's wonderful. And how does that affect their buried wealth? It doesn't. Notice the different spiritual issue that's involved when we're talking about the burying bad steward. This is not an income sharing conversation. So let's talk a bit about wealth. How do we approach the topic of wealth? How do we approach it with donors? Well, one of the greatest things to use in any kind of donor communications is to share donor stories. But I want to suggest to you not to share just donor stories, but instead to share asset donor stories. This is another best practice that's at least a couple thousand years old. Notice the donor stories that we get in the New Testament. For example, from Acts 2:45, and they would sell their property, katemata, and possessions, huperoxes, and share them with all. Or from Acts 4:35, from time to time, those who owned land, kurion, or houses, oikion, sold them, brought the money from the sales, and put it at the apostles' feet. So 4 different words here where we're sharing asset donor stories that all have slightly different examples, different meanings. In fact, if we're going to share donor stories, let's share donor stories about major gifts of called Barnabas by the apostles, which translated means sons of encouragement, owned a tract of land, agru. So he sold it and brought the money and laid it at the apostles' feet. Or Mary of Bethany, when we look at Mark 14, came with an alabaster vial of very expensive perfume of pure nard. She broke the vial and poured the perfume over his head. This perfume could have been sold for over 300 denarii. She has done a good work for me. Now, I mention that phrase because that phrase of good work, it's the exact same word that we see being used in our passage for being rich in good works. Exact same terminology that we're referencing, the kind of thing that Mary of Bethany did there with her major gift of assets. So, what best practices can we pull out of this? Don't just tell donor stories, tell asset donor stories, and tell many of them. Notice the variety of assets in these donor stories. We get 6 different examples of assets that are given, and these are not income sharing. These are accumulated wealth, accumulated assets. This is wealth sharing or asset sharing. Now, why do we go through all of this? Well, part of it is psychological. I believe that if you have somebody who already cares about your cause or your organization, the single biggest transformation you can make with that donor is to get them to consider their wealth, not just their disposable income, as donation relevant. Now, I don't want to just share with you examples or ideas, but let me share with you some data. We did an analysis of organizations that raised all of their gifts from cash, which tends to come from disposable income, both at the beginning and at the end of that 5-year period, and compare them with organizations that were also including in that receiving gifts of wealth, in this case, gifts of securities, non-cash gifts. Now, those cash-only organizations, on average, over this 5-year period, their total contributions grew a total of 11%. That's the same as the inflation rate over that period of time. They were just treading water. Organizations that both at the beginning and at the end were also including these gifts of assets, their combined growth was 6 times greater than the cash-only organizations. This is a result that was true across the country for every different type of cause, every different kind of organization, very consistently. Now, here's another way that we can get people to start thinking of their wealth, not just their disposable income, as donation relevant. And that is to understand that for most people, the very first time that they will ever commit to a gift from their wealth is when they make that commitment in a gift in a will or an estate planning gift. Now, estate planning then makes them reconceptualize their wealth as donation relevant. How does that impact their current giving? Well, here's a study from UC Davis Law Review, and we were looking at a nationally representative data set that tracks when people have a charitable component in their estate plan. And so what we're able to do is to compare the same people on the left-hand side in the white bars and on the right-hand side in the black bars as to what happens to their current giving after they add a charity to their estate plan. And on average, it goes up 77%. And that bump in current giving is a permanent bump. It is sustained 2 years, 4 years, 6, even 8 years later. We see this sustained increase in charitable giving. In many cases, this is because people have begun to consider their wealth as donation relevant. Now, this idea, kind of not a new idea. That's exactly the same idea that Paul opens with in his discussion of wealth earlier in the chapter. What does he start with? He starts with the estate planning conversation. For we have brought nothing into the world, so we cannot take anything out of it either. So now we're talking about wealth, and we're talking about, of all things, estate planning before we ultimately get to that major gifts punchline. Let me make one other key distinction before we go through this passage, and that is you need to understand the difference between almsgiving and mutual sharing. Now, one of the things that's critical to know about this passage is that it's about sharing. Just as in the Old Testament, there are different rules for different gifts. Unfortunately, we often mix these rules up by using the same English word for two opposite types of gifts. There is what you might think of as giving down. This is eleemosune. This is almsgiving, mercy, pity, alms. A different kind of giving is giving across. This is sharing in our passage, koinonikus, with the fellowship community. Now, the fellowship community in the New Testament is the koinonia. So let's look at some examples of these two different kinds of giving. In Acts 3, we've got two. We have this, and a man who had been unable to walk from birth was being carried, whom they used to set down every day at the gate of the temple, which is called Beautiful, in order for him to beg for eleemosune from those entering the temple grounds. Now, notice the English just says charitable gifts. When he saw Peter and John about to go into the temple grounds, he began to ask to receive a charitable gift. But the word is different. It's eleemosune. So eleemosune, almsgiving, matches with begging, not with major gifts fundraising. Now, is this kind of giving down or almsgiving supposed to be secretive and hidden? The answer is absolutely yes. We can see that in Matthew 6, 2 through 4. Jesus says, so when you eleemosune, here translated give to the poor, do not sound a trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and on the streets, so that they will be praised by the people. Truly I say to you, they have their reward in full. But when you eleemosune, give to the poor, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your charitable giving, but it's actually eleemosune, will be in secret. And your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. Now, I want to suggest that giving across, this mutual sharing, is a different animal. And believe it or not, after the book of Acts, there is no usage of eleemosune or almsgiving. This new type of giving is koinonia sharing. That is mutual sharing with the fellowship community, the koinonia. And we see that used in 1 Timothy 6, 2 Corinthians 8, Romans 15, 2 Corinthians 9, Hebrews 13, Galatians 6, Romans 12, and Philippians 4. This is not giving down to the outsider. This is giving across to the brother and sister. It's mutual sharing. Notice in 2 Corinthians, Paul calls this kind of giving koinonias, and he explains, at this present time, your abundance will serve as assistance for their need, so that their abundance may also serve as assistance for your need, so that there may be equality. Now, is giving across, sharing, supposed to be secretive and hidden? I'm going to say absolutely not. In fact, let's see how Paul dealt with this kind of giving. In 2 Corinthians 8:24, he said, therefore, openly before the churches, show them the proof of your love and our reason for boasting about you. In 2 Corinthians 9, 2 through 4, he says, I have been boasting to the churches in Macedonia that you in Greece were ready to send an offering a year ago. In fact, it was your enthusiasm that stirred up many of the Macedonian believers to begin giving. I don't want to be wrong in my boasting about you. We would be embarrassed, not to mention your own embarrassment if some Macedonian believers came with me and found that you weren't ready after all I had told them. This is massive donor publicity, even publicizing just the intention to make a gift to the entire region, and then also threatening public humiliation if they don't publicly, openly before the churches. Literally, the phrase is in the face of the churches, show to them the proof of your love when you make that gift. Now, this is actually nothing new. It's not something Paul invented. Ministry donors have always been known and named individually. We know about Mary and Joanna and Susanna and Barnabas and Phoebe. These are not examples of almsgiving or giving down. This is giving across. Main point is this. Koinonikus is not the same thing as eleemosune. Sharing with the fellowship community is not the same as almsgiving. Giving across is not the same as giving down. Don't mix and match these gifts or their rules. Begging pairs with almsgiving. Major gift fundraising is not about almsgiving, giving down, or eleemosune. Now, I say all that to make this main point. If what you are doing feels like begging, you're doing it wrong. That's not what this is. This is a different kind of giving. Okay, so biblical fundraising is not begging. So then, what is it? Let's take a look at the passage. Biblical fundraising is actually about asking the donor to enjoy their wealth. It's not like ordinary fundraising, just asking the donor to give up their money. So let's dive a little bit into this. This passage is actually a list explaining how to enjoy. Why does God richly supply all of these things? He supplies them for enjoyment. Professor Abraham Mallerby writes, quote, the construction, ace plus the noun, expresses purpose. The infinitives thus describe how wealth is to be enjoyed, namely in the ways it is used. Now, it turns out that wealth enjoyment is actually the whole point of the message. Don't bury it and die with it. You're supposed to enjoy what God has richly supplied. And we can see this some in the poetic structure of this passage. Here, Paul is writing in a chiastic structure. We call it that because the Greek chi looks like an X. And so he's using a series of parallels that makes a contrast. But that chiastic structure has a point. What is the point of this series of contrasts? The point is the purpose. The purpose is for enjoyment. So let's talk about how to enjoy wealth. What is, by the way, the one thing you can't do with wealth? Well, I already gave you the answer to the test just a few verses earlier. That's the 1 Timothy 6:7, for we brought nothing into the world, so we cannot take anything out of it either. This echoes Solomon, as he came naked from his mother's womb, so he will return as he came. He will take nothing from the fruit of his labor that he can carry in his hand. The one thing you can't do with wealth is keep it. So what can we do with wealth? Well, until we lose it at death, there are actually only 4 wealth management options. You can binge, bury, toil, or enjoy. You can binge, that's excessive consumption, which ultimately leads to depression. That's Solomon's experiment back in Ecclesiastes. You can bury it in the ground just to lose it at death. You can toil, that is, just keep hustling to bury even more in the ground and then just lose it at death. Or you can enjoy it. Now, the word that's translated here as uncertainty of riches, it's a really cool word because it means 2 things at the same time. It means the uncertainty of riches, but it also means the hiddenness of riches. So the idea is not to set their hope on the hiddenness of riches as well as the uncertainty of riches. So let's talk about this option of bury it and die with it. What happens when we choose to bury it and die with it? Now, just think about the practical reality in your own personal experience. Does dying with buried wealth lead to family harmony? What have you seen? Is family harmony usually better or worse than if nothing had been left? Now, as a lawyer, I can tell you in law practice, what do we call it when family members spend money on lawyers to fight with each other over dividing up assets? Well, we call it divorce, or we call it probate. And I can tell you from personal experience that many of these fights are just as angry and emotional in probate as they are in divorce. Now, Jesus actually tells the story of the rich fool who just stored up wealth and died with it. But sometimes people miss what prompted him to tell this story. Believe it or not, it was a probate fight. So notice before he tells the story. Now, someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the family inheritance with me." But he said to him, "You there, who appointed me a judge or arbiter over the 2 of you?" And then notice what he does. He turns to the crowd and he uses this person as an example of what's going to happen to their buried wealth. But he said to them, "Beware." And then he shares the story of the rich fool who just stacked it up and died with it. Does dying with buried wealth lead to family wisdom? Solomon said, "So I hated the fruit of all my labor for which I had labored under the sun, because I must leave it to the man who will come after me, and who knows whether he will be wise or a fool." Hey, if you haven't read that part of the Old Testament, spoiler alert, he was a fool. So, what have you seen? Does an unexpected windfall of unearned death money make wise life choices more likely or less likely? Here's what we see from research. In a national study of inheritors, over one third had their net worth fall back to or below their pre-inheritance level within about 12 months. A more recent study estimates this likelihood as being over 40%, closer to 50%. This is what happens to that buried wealth in many cases. So, by the way, which of these choices is most common among the wealth holders, among the wealthy? Well, here's national data on the top 6% of wealth holders, and it shows their rate of wealth accumulation as they age at different ages. Now, among the top 6% of wealth holders, the rate of wealth accumulation doesn't go down when they hit retirement age. In fact, it goes up. It increases every year after age 65. They build wealth at a faster rate in their 70s than they did in their 60s. And they build wealth at an even faster rate in their 80s than they did in their 70s, and even faster still in their 90s. Now, what does this data say that is important for fundraising? You need to understand this reality. If the wealthy person fails to enjoy the wealth through their giving, they will bury the wealth and they will die with it. That's the alternative. That's what you are competing against. So understand, why should you feel perfectly comfortable to have a conversation about someone making a gift of 10 million or 50 million? You don't go into it, oh, they're giving up so much. No, this is what they're giving up. If you aren't able to convince them to enjoy their wealth through their giving, statistically, I can tell you exactly what they're going to do with it. They're going to bury it and they're going to die with it. Which of these choices does this ministry encourage? Well, I think it's obvious. It encourages wealth enjoyment. Biblical fundraising is about asking the donor to enjoy their wealth, not just about asking the donor to give up their money. So, how can a person really enjoy their wealth? The next words give the details. We actually get 4 different levels of enjoyment. And I know in the English that just keeps using the same word, good, good. It's not the same word. These are different things, 4 different things that we begin with. It begins with enjoyable personal impact. This is the concept of good work that is good whether it be seen to be so or not. We also get a bit of enjoyable personal status. The rich in good works, this is a large accumulation of good works. So this is a good that is good, worthy, honorable, noble, and seen to be so. Beyond this, we get something else. This idea of to be generous, this is an enjoyable self-identity. The phrase here, eumetodotus enai, enai is the donor's I am. Eumetodotus is good sharing, that is joyful abounding, ready willing, and abundant rich. All 3 of those ideas are incorporated into this word. It's actually a brand new word. Paul constructed it just specifically for this passage. And finally, the donor gets an enjoyable social identity, enai koinonikos, the identity statement of the donor, the enai, as it becomes as a fellowship community sharer, a koinonia sharer. 4 different levels of enjoyment from their wealth. So let's jump into this. Notice the message is that you make beautiful things happen. Biblical fundraising is about the donor's actions and impact, perhaps using the nonprofit as a helpful weapon or instrument. This is different than ordinary fundraising, which is just about the nonprofit's actions and impact, maybe using the donor's money as a helpful weapon or instrument. Notice this is talking about my impact of my gift. In both of these phrases, to do good or to be rich in good works, these are actually in the original words, these are versions of work, ergon, from to work or accomplish. What is this a good work? What does the work phrase reference? A worker who accomplishes something, a deed or action that carries out, completes an inner desire, intention, or purpose. Notice Paul's instruction directs the donor to accomplish something. Love this story. This was from a major gifts fundraiser, very successful. And he was actually on a plane. Patrick's about to jump on a plane. Well, he was on a plane, and somebody was asking him next to him, "Oh, what do you do?" And he explained it. And the person responded this way. She said, "Oh, I could never do that. I couldn't ask people for money." His response, I thought, was fascinating. He said, "I don't ask people for money. I ask people to do things that happen to cost money." So notice how that phrasing changes the concept of the role of the donor. I don't ask people of the fundraiser. I don't ask people for money. If we actually want to use the scriptural words, I ask people to do good things that happen to cost money. So notice the difference between talking about my impact, which is what the scripture does, versus my cost. Think about that. Does your language offer them the chance to do good works? Or does it just ask them for money? Donors want to know, what happens if I make a gift? What will change? Or I made a gift. What happened? What changed? So think about your messaging. Does their gift do good? Does it help them to become rich in good works? Another message we get here is the idea that you are an admirable person. Biblical fundraising enhances the donor's identity. Ordinary fundraising tends to enhance only the nonprofit's identity. So always think about in your messaging who gets to feel rich in good works. Is it the donor, as in this passage, or is it just the ministry employees that are projected as being rich in good works? Also, notice this difference is a difference between giving and sharing. It's the idea that you, donor, are one of us. Biblical fundraising enhances the donor's connection to community, Greek word koinonia, by asking them to share. The phrase here, the word here is koinonikos, with fellow community members. Ordinary fundraising allows detachment by just asking to give away to outsiders. Also, there's the notion of paying it back because you're a good partner. Biblical fundraising emphasizes reciprocity for the good things that God and the fellowship community have shared with the donor. This is not just a disconnected transfer to outsiders. Also, notice that this is about giving big. This is not about small pocket change decisions. Biblical fundraising boldly encourages rich, generous gifts of wealth sharing. Ordinary fundraising timidly asks small and safe. Now, notice some other emphasis here that this is an investment with real permanence. Biblical fundraising delivers lasting results. It's not just about getting cash now. Ultimately, this is the best deal ever. It is offering the best way to wealth enjoyment. It's offering a superior life experience. Biblical fundraising delivers ultimate value to the donor, that superior life experience. Ordinary fundraising tends to deliver value only to the nonprofit, just a way to get cash. Notice these value phrases so that they may take hold of that which is truly life, to do good, to be rich in good works, to be generous and ready to share, storing up for themselves the treasure of a good foundation for the future. Let's get practical about this. Nobody wants this obituary. You made a lot of money, the end. Now tell me, who wouldn't want to trade it for this one? Isn't this offering a better deal? He really took hold of that which is truly life. He did a lot of good. He was so rich in good works. He was always generous and ready to share. He stored up for himself the treasure of a good foundation for the future. So I want to suggest maybe instead of calling it major gifts fundraising, which is not a biblical phrase, we call it the ministry of wealth enjoyment. What do? We help rich people enjoy their wealth. Now, that may seem like a crazy statement to you, but I want you to put yourself in the position of the wealth holder. Suppose they're coming in, they're visiting your nonprofit or your ministry, and as part of the visit, you then walk into your offices, and above that set of offices is the title Major Gifts Fundraising Department. How does that person feel? Ooh, I don't know. I feel a little, maybe grab my pocketbook. I don't know what their wealth screening tools have said that I can do. This is going to be uncomfortable, right? What if instead, above that title, it instead read the Ministry of Wealth Enjoyment or the Department of Wealth Enjoyment? Well, what kind of reaction are you going to get then? What? Wait, maybe some curiosity, some interest. What's this about? Notice that difference when we're presenting it as here is the most fun that you can have with your wealth. Let me show you some ways. Let me show you some opportunities where you can really enjoy it. Enjoy it by using it to do intrinsic good. Enjoy it by actually start accumulating many of these beautiful, noble, inspirational good works to change your identity or enhance your identity of being a joyful, generous sharer with the fellowship community. So, do we approach fundraising with the idea of saying, "Well, my job, I get out there and I ask people for money," or do we look at it in a different way? I help our donors get more enjoyment from their wealth. I share opportunities for gifts that match their values and life story, that help them to accomplish real good, that help them to bring great beauty into the world, that help them to give well and joyfully, that deeply connect them with a mutual fellowship community. I help to find or construct those giving opportunities that will create the most enjoyable, meaningful, and impactful life experience for donors. So let's talk about the fundraiser's role. The relationship is actually defined here in the passage. Now, this translation uses the word instruct, but the original word is parangele. Now, biblical fundraising comes alongside, that's the para prefix, the wealthy, in a sincere relationship of ministry to deliver an authorized message. That's angel, authorized message about generosity. So instruct, a parangele, in a military context means command. Likely in your ministry context, it's not going to mean that. And in fact, in his own fundraising appeal, Paul writes, I am not saying this as a command. Notice the difference. Ordinary fundraising begs from below, attacks the wealthy from above, or simply just avoids the wealthy. Begging pairs with almsgiving. That's for small gifts. That's not what we're doing. Advising, coming alongside to deliver an authorized message about creating good works and sharing, that's what pairs with major life investment gifts. Notice this next phrase. It is a phrase that is communicating a core successful fundraising message. You're the kind of person who makes gifts like this. Notice that this passage, biblical fundraising, starts by talking about the donor's identity. They give because of who they are. Ordinary fundraising, we just want to talk about the nonprofit's identity. They're supposed to give because of who we are. Now, one of the things to not misunderstand about the original phrasing here is that it's actually not an accusation. Instead, it describes a desirable, long-term, ongoing identity. Not to be conceited, references an in-progress continuing process. That's the present infinitive that pictures the action expressed by the verb as being in progress. And set their hope on is actually a perfect tense, which in Greek expresses the present result of a past action, something they've done already in the past. One interlinear calls it to have put hope. Now, how would we use this in a current conversation? We use this with a donor identity message to communicate that you are the kind of person who makes gifts like this. Might sound something like this. You know, Bob, one of the things that I appreciate about you is that although you have wealth, you aren't conceited about it. You don't let it separate you from others. You have wealth, but you haven't set your hope on it. Instead, you have set your hope on God, who provides us with these things and even wants us to enjoy them. In fact, I think you might enjoy the good you could do by funding this exciting work. That's the donor identity message. There's also another fundraising message here. It's the message that now is the time to decide what to do with your temporary wealth. Biblical fundraising focuses on the donor's wealth plans. Ordinary fundraising tends to just focus on the charity's plans. Now is the time. Now, the donor is described as those who are rich in the now time or in the now age. But actually, the earliest manuscript, the one here, Codex Sinaiticus, says rich at this opportune moment. So in either case, the point is, hey, you've got an excellent opportunity right now. But in either case, wealth is uncertain and disappearing. So I'm hoping that what you pull from this is some fundraiser empowerment. This is a scripturally commanded message. You are an authorized messenger. You can come alongside the rich. These status differences are just temporary and tentative. You can encourage wealth sharing, not just disposable income almsgiving. You are offering the best deal ever. They get to do what? They get to enjoy their wealth, to do intrinsically good work, to create beautiful, visible good works, to become generous and sharing, to store up treasure for the future, to take hold of a superior life experience. Honestly, this is the best deal ever. Paul shares this great list of donor benefits, except I got to tell you, it's not a list. It's a story. What do I mean? A story progresses through definite elements. We get a backstory and setting. These will establish motivation from the main character's original identity, their people, values, and life story. There will be a call to adventure. This is the main character's challenge, which, although extreme, will at that point seem appropriate. Then we'll have a climax and resolution. These show the main character's victory and their altered identity. Now, who is the main character of this story? Well, I hope you've picked it up by this point. It's the high capacity donor to those who are rich, that is, wealth holders in this present world. What is the main character's backstory? Well, the main character's values, not to be conceited or high-minded, not separated or above the fellowship community, references an in-progress continuing process. It's about their life story. Set their hope on is a perfect tense, which in Greek expresses the present result of a past action. This is their life story and their people. All of us together do the same thing. God richly supplies us with all things to enjoy, to use them to do good, to be rich in good works. What is the main character's backstory? Reciprocity and paying it forward because they're not separated, conceited, or high-minded from the fellowship community, having placed their hope in God who richly supplies and following the mutual fellowship community norm of sharing together. What's the setting of this story? This is set in the land of wealth sharing, not disposable income giving. Question that came up: how does tithing relate to this kind of giving? Tithing's great. Income sharing is great. Love it. It's wonderful. It's not what we're talking about. Not talking about income sharing. We are talking about wealth sharing. Different animal. This is the land of wealth sharing, not disposable income. Notice again. It's wealth, 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 wealth. We're not talking about income sharing. What is the main character's challenge? Well, the main character's challenge: to enjoy what God has richly supplied. Don't bury it and die with it. How do they enjoy it? By using it to do good work, to be rich in good works, to be generous and ready to share. Is this challenge urgent? You better believe it is. Yes, you are a wealth holder, but only right now at this opportune moment. We all know your wealth is uncertain and disappearing, and your wealth holding could end at any moment. Why is this extreme challenge appropriate? Well, the reference point is wealth, not disposable income. That's a massively larger reference point. Hey, it's going to be disappearing anyway. You're just moving part of it into a different investment type. You've received all these things from God, and it's what we all do with God's various blessings. It's how we enjoy wealth. What is the main character's victory? Oh, wow. They get to do good. That accomplishes something. Remember, that's what the word means, to be rich in beautiful, visible good works, storing up for themselves the treasure of a good foundation for the future. What is the main character's altered identity in the resolution? Well, they get to not just do something, they get to be something. They get to be rich in good works. They get to be generous so that they may take hold of that which is truly life. So what we see here is a donor story. The donor story has a backstory, a call to adventure, a climax, and a resolution. It walks through for the donor every element of the donor story right after Paul writes to Timothy, here's what you say. It is the outline for major gifts fundraising. And as we think about that outline, that, if you want to remember all those story elements, that's great. I suggest just remember three words: identity, challenge, and victory. Is your major gifts fundraising missing any of these story elements? When you make that challenge, are you just asking for money, or are you asking people to do things that happen to cost money? The difference between that is a challenge that promises the hope of a victory. That's when we're asking people to do things, not asking people for money. Now, beyond promising that hope of a victory, we want that challenge to connect to the donor's identity. It connects in two ways. One, it connects because that victory is going to be personally meaningful for the donor. Why? Because it's going to be meaningful for their identity, for their people, for their values, for their life story. And also, why are they going to make this gift? Why are they going to accept this challenge? They're going to accept this challenge because of who they are, because of their values, because of their life story, because of their people, values, life story. All three of them are referenced in this passage, and all three of those are identity references that are Paul's argument for why the person will accept this great challenge, the challenge to enjoy their wealth. Don't bury it and die with it. So let's get practical. Is your major gifts fundraising missing any of these story elements? Do you have the call to adventure? Are you delivering that authorized message, not just being friendly? Is it connected with the donor's backstory, their identity from their people, their values, and their life story? Is it set in the land of wealth sharing, not just disposable income pocket change decisions? Does it result in a victory for the donor? Do you offer a resolution that confirms the donor's enhanced identity? Now, I want to mention that all of this stuff I do share for free. All of it's for free at encouragegenerosity.com, or just connect with me on LinkedIn. If you do that, I'll send you links to all of this stuff. If you want the secular stuff, that's great. I teach at a state university, so I don't normally get to talk about these things. If you want the biblical stuff, that's there as well. So as we end today, I want you to think a little bit about what ideas connect for you. Are there things you like, things you don't like about this approach? Why is that? Does it change or reinforce anything you feel about the fundraiser's role, the fundraiser's relationship, or the core message that we are delivering? Again, if you're interested in this sort of thing, 3 books for free, at least the PDFs. If you want the actual paper version, you've got to get lucky and win the contest. I think they're sending out 10 of those paper versions. You can get those on Amazon. But if you connect with me on LinkedIn, I'll send you the PDF links and also the audio links on that upcoming for free as well. So, folks, I hope some of that was interesting. I want to make sure to end before the top of the hour here, and appreciate those that have brought in, that have submitted any questions along the way, and also appreciate all of the comments coming in. So I'll stop there for a moment in case somebody from Free Will wants to jump in. Hi, Michael.
Hi, Russell. Thanks so much, Dr. James, for a powerful and thought-provoking session. I'm Michael Fisher, Faith Partnerships Lead here at Free Will. We're honored that you spent your time learning with us today. For me, anytime I hear Russell speak, even if I've heard the same content recently, there's always something to learn and a little throwback to Greek class. A quick reminder for those of you before we sign off. Most important thing you can do right now is you can complete the survey that we've dropped a link to in the chat. If you're looking for CFRE credit, this is how we record the attendance for those records. There's also an option for you to provide feedback. And if you'd like, you can request follow-up with a member of our faith team here at Free Will to learn more about how you can unlock these larger gifts, potentially through a partnership with Free Will. Finally, thanks to our friends at the Association of Christian Fundraisers for helping spread the word about this webinar. We'll email everyone a copy of the recording and post it to our webinars page when we're finished. And we should have some more webinars, potentially with Dr. James coming up this summer. So if you'd like to speak on a webinar in the future, or you'd like to attend those, be on the lookout on your email for those links coming up. Russell, anything else to add before we wrap up?
No, just appreciate the opportunity to share. And anybody that wants to suffer through 2 500-page books on this topic, feel free and jump on encouragegenerosity.com or just connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm just Russell James at Texas Tech University.
Excellent. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. Don't forget the survey is still open in the chat, and we'd love to hear from you. Bye now.